Immigration reform is a hot topic in Washington, D.C. and here in your town. The decisions made now could affect you for years.
This week, we're taking an in-depth look at immigration reform and the issues surrounding it. Tonight, News 10's Jessica DeNova kicks off our coverage with a look at why the experts say this is something we need to be talking about.
With an estimated 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, comprehensive immigration reform is a hot topic in D.C.
I think it's time for the country to step up and take a look at the issue. It hasn't been addressed in a meaningful way since 1986.
In your state's capital, lawmakers say now is the time for Oregon to come together with the rest of the nation and help people from other countries.
I mean, that's where our forefathers came from. We weren't born here, we immigrated, and it's just not fair to say, well, we're just going to close the border behind us. But it needs to be a rational approach within the law and not carving exceptions here and there that undermines the law, the rule of law that we have that makes America great and consistent.
Though America's forefathers did come from around the world, opponents say we can't just take everyone who decides to come to America.
The United States was built by immigrants. I have no argument with that at all. But as the country began to fill, immigration laws were put into place.
And in your town, one immigration attorney believes it starts at home.
We strengthen the families that we have in the Valley because it's erroneous to think that the undocumented person exists in a vacuum. No, they've married, they've established roots, they have children here. A lot of times those families are U.S. citizens. So we're strengthening our American families by giving comprehensive immigration reform.
To understand where we are, experts say we need to know how we got here. The number of unauthorized immigrants started growing at the beginning of the 20th century when a new wave of European immigrants, such as Italians, Greeks, Polish, Slavs, and more Catholics and Jews, began replacing earlier German and Irish newcomers.
There's a lot of concern from sort of older stock Americans about the ethnic, religious composition of these new arrivals in the first decade and a half of the 20th century. And so you've already got some pushback to these immigration patterns relatively early on.
Then a pause in immigration when World War I made it difficult to travel across the Atlantic. With the Immigration Act of 1924, the first major piece of legislation dealing with immigration, limits were set on the number of people coming into the U.S. from around the world, using 1890 as the base year.
Of course, 1890 is important. It's before the new immigration happened. So if you're trying to keep the United States a more sort of Western and Northern European kind of country, the quotas for those countries are going to be much higher.
Asian immigrants were excluded altogether. Today, Professor Walcher says the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 is essentially still the basis of the nation's immigration policy.
Rather than national origins, it put a priority on family reunification, on relatives, and on a secondary level on what skills you might have when you're coming to the United States.
Walcher says the ethnic composition of legal immigrants coming into the U.S. changed in the 70s and 80s as a result of the 1965 law.
Lots of Latino immigration will be way up in those years. Lots more Asian immigration than what you'd seen before.
Illegal immigration was also on the rise.
Now, throughout all of this time, you've got an issue of illegal immigration too, particularly in the last third of the 20th century. And some of it's sort of a wink and a nod. If there's jobs in the United States, if agricultural growers, home builders and the like that aren't being filled, there's demand for labor. People aren't looking particularly closely at paperwork.
President Reagan tried reforming immigration law, but the 1986 Immigration and Reform Act didn't deal with employment verification or address the country's labor needs. Many saw it as a failure.
All these years later, we have 11 million people that are in this country without documentation. So the fear is what's going to prevent this from happening again.
Tomorrow, hear why and how some local immigrants came to America. We'll be right back with more News 10 at 6.